Alrighty, let's get started. Can y'all hear me okay? We doing good? Alrighty. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Olo Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston. Just a reminder that everything we discuss on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only. Oh my god, so much camera shake. And nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. So if y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Right, so we're not going to be talking about clinical stuff today. We are going to be talking about just life stuff. So hope y'all are doing well. Hope y'all had a good weekend. Hope 2022 is treating you well. I don't know how many of y'all watched our New Year's resolution bit, but I'm super curious how that's going to affect people, if it'll be helpful or not helpful. Escapism. Is that part of our... Yeah, so we're going to be talking a little bit about escapism today. How did y'all know? How do y'all know these things, chat? So, audio delay. Is there an audio delay for realsies? What's going on? Is it? Really? Twitter? No. Okay. Okay, so I'm hearing a lot of people say no. So maybe the lagger is you and not the Dr. K. So a couple of things just to let y'all know. So we're super happy with how Healthy Gamer has gone so far. We've grown a lot and our demographic has changed a lot. And so we've got some cool stuff coming down the pipeline for y'all. A couple of things to let y'all know about. So our Discord now has a careers channel. So I think something that's kind of interesting is that our community seems to be getting better. And I don't know if that's because we're attracting different people, which I think is a piece of it, or what's happening is like people are actually starting to like put their lives together. And so I think that where our community was like 3 years ago when we started streaming is actually like very different from where we are now. So a lot of people have started to, put together their lives and stuff. So I think that the needs of the HG community appear to be evolving, and we're going to do our best to evolve with them and try to support y'all in whatever way y'all want. So check out our careers channel on Discord if you guys are interested. You have more career-oriented stuff, questions, things like that. And we're going to be back to a regular schedule this week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We may have an interview somewhere in there. I'm not quite sure. But we're kind of working on that stuff. We won't leave you degenerates behind. And a big part of that is you're not actually a degenerate, right? You're just working at your own pace. So, all right. So we've got some good posts for y'all today. So we're going to talk a little bit about locus of control. So we're going to talk about a couple of my favorite topics that are a little bit more advanced in sort of like the motivation, anxiety, understanding yourself kind of dimensions. The other thing that I was thinking about recently is that we don't really give you guys much concrete advice in terms of like planning and stuff like that. So there's one post today that I want to talk about where I'm going to actually like try to sketch things out a little bit more concretely. And, I'm curious if that'll be helpful. And so most of the time, we emphasize like awareness and understanding, which is, I think, really good because there seem to be a lot of people out there that are solution focused. But there was one post today that made me really think about, maybe we should just give people like more of a straight playbook and just like do this stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So let's go ahead and get started. Escapism. Oh, yeah. So I'll give you guys a choice. We've got three options. We can talk about locus of control. Maybe we can, whatever. Locus of control. We're going to talk a little bit about religion and mental health. And the third option is overcoming escapism. And there are a couple. There's just so much good stuff. We don't have time to get everything. I do not have any inherent value. That's the fourth one. So what do y'all want to talk about today? Poll? Chatars? Mods? Let me see if I can make a poll. What we do. Beautiful. Okay, so people may not know what locus of control is. So interesting, because I had sort of prepared them in that order. So thinking that I would do locus of control for sure, and then religion and mental health, and then, Okay. What is locus of control? That's a great question. So let me show you all this. So can Dr. K talk about the epidemic of people feeling powerless and how to overcome this feeling? So overcoming powerlessness, I guess, is what locus of control really means. Okay, we'll get to. I mean, we don't have to do everything. I mean, we'll get to all four of them hopefully. Okay. Okay. All right. So I guess I should have defined terms. So we'll work on that. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to start with then is something a little bit more practical. Okay. So let's take a look at this, and then we'll kind of. This is what the people want. This is what the people shall get. Okay. So currently writing how to overcome escapism. So currently writing this on a break at my job, but I desperately need help. I've been watching Dr. K for the past year now, and every video has been super helpful and eye-opening for me. I've taken it all in and understood, but I'm here facing my problems once again, and I want to run away again. My problem is ever since I began working at an early age, I've had difficulty holding a job. As I got older, it got far worse, and I'm worried about being a burden and not being able to take care of myself. I'm currently 26. Before I used to work full day shifts every day I was scheduled and be able to buy the things I wanted and take care of myself. Fast forward to now, I'm deep in debt and can barely stay on the job for more than an hour and quit because my brain just can't handle it. It assigns too much value to gaming and sleeping and hanging with friends on Discord or watching anime. I feel like every time I confront this major issue, I always run away. Thankfully, with Amazon, I can quit whenever and join whenever, but I can't keep doing this. I need to start paying my own insurance among myself, and I want to get out of debt. My mind seems to spiral out of control, and I want to run home and be comfortable in my bubble. I managed to survive day one yesterday, but I fear I won't last much longer. All of Dr. K's videos just out my brain, and when I get here. Help. Okay. So this is... unfortunately, a pretty common problem, right? So I'm going to try to summarize what I hear, what I'm sort of picking up from this. So sometimes in life, we feel paralyzed by our minds. So we know that there are things that we have to do. We know we need to get our stuff in order, right? But despite the fact that there are things that we know we need to be doing, our mind wants nothing more than to run away from our problems. And so what a lot of people may think is that, okay, if I want to run away from my problems, how do I find the root cause of this, right? So a lot of people, this is what we've advocated. So here at HE, what we've advocated is that, if you're struggling to overcome escapism in your life, that you do a lot of introspective work, you dig down really deep and you find the root of it. Are you afraid of failure? Are you afraid of commitment? What's the deep-rooted fear that you can kind of fix to overcome this escapism? And so I think that's really useful. But I think that sometimes if you're in this situation, the best thing to do is not actually to try to overcome the emotional root of escapism, but the best thing to do is actually learn how to train your mind. So let's take a quick look at this, okay? So what I want y'all to first start by looking at is, and this happens to everyone, right? So our mind doesn't always work for us. And this is what makes life really, really hard, is that our mind isn't working for our benefit. It has its own goals and aspirations and desires. And then we can get super stuck because we have particular goals and desires, and our mind has particular goals and desires, and we're not working towards the same thing. So as long as our mind is not working for us, life is super, super hard. You're kind of handicapped because there's a major component, part of your body, your mind. There's a part of your being that is supposed to be used for your benefit, which is kind of off and doing whatever it wants to. And like I said, sometimes the solution to that is to go into the mind and try to fix something on deep inside the mind so that the mind starts functioning properly. And sometimes the solution is actually not to fix the mind, but to get control of the mind. So even if the mind is afraid of escape, afraid of consequences, afraid of failure, wants to escape, we can actually control it and tell it to do what we want it to do. So I'm going to take a quick look at this post and we'll just sort of notice this, okay? So I've taken it all in and understood it, but here I am facing my problems once again, and I want to run away. So my problem is that I've had difficulty holding a job, right? So that, like, what does that exactly mean? Like, what's going on in your mind? I used to work full shifts and be able to buy the things that I wanted and take care of myself, but now I can't. I'm deep in debt, can barely stay on the job for more than an hour, and quit because my brain just can't handle it. This is a sign of your mind or your brain controlling you as opposed to the other way around. And this person has even had some amount of insight, right? It assigns too much value to gaming and sleeping and hanging with friends on Discord or watching anime. So this is like where this person is noticing, and this is awesome because this is what we want from our community, right? We want you to notice what your mind is doing. But every time I confront this major issue, I always run away, right? And then this person goes on to say, thankfully, I can quit whenever I want to and join whenever, but I can't do this. This is not something to be thankful for, right? So you found a job at Amazon that can tailor to the desires of your escapist mind. So you've even structured a life for yourself that allows you to be escapist, right? Because then you what does your mind tell you? It says, oh, there's no real consequence of quitting this job, right? I can get it back whenever I want to. So we can procrastinate today. You can just quit today. You could take a week off playing games and watching anime and things like this, and then I can just get the job next week. And so in a weird way, this job is almost like enabling your escapist mentality, right? So we have to be super careful about what we're grateful for. But of course you're grateful for it because you're like, oh, like now I don't actually have external consequences that force me to action. And if I don't have external consequences that force me to action, then I can continue like sort of being escapist, and it's like not that big of a deal, right? And so my mind seems to spiral out of control, and I want to run home and be comfortable in my bubble. So normally when I take this kind of, when I look at this kind of post, I would talk about things like, oh, you know, where's the source of your escapism? What's going on? We could maybe do that down the road. But what I really want to talk to y'all, today about today is getting control of your mind. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, we don't actually control our mind, right? So our mind kind of does what it wants to. Like, for example, I have patients who have OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder, and their mind will produce all kinds of thoughts that they don't want. So our mind values particular things. It tells us to stay away from particular things. It does all kinds of stuff that, you know, like isn't necessarily under our control. And so one of the key things that I want to share with y'all today is how to get control of your mind. And because this is something that it's kind of weird, but just in the same way that you can train your fingers to play piano, or you can train your palate to, you know, taste different things, or you can train your legs to be able to run, or your cardiovascular system to be able to run. You can even, there are people who are free divers, right, that will train their body to hold their breath for like 10 minutes at a time. So we can train all manner of different parts of ourselves. And one of the things that we really don't get taught how to train is our mind. So what I'm going to share with you guys today is nothing about like sort of fixing the internal part of the mind. So let's say here's our mind. And in the mind, there's something, you know, there's something bad in here. This is the fear of escapism down here. And so what a lot of times what we try to do at Healthy Gamer is we try to teach you, okay, how do I take that fear of escapism and kind of solve it within the mind so that I'm no longer controlled by that fear. Whereas instead, what we're going to work on today is we're not going to do anything inside the mind. We're going to learn how to control it from the outside, right? So we're going to learn how to get our mind into shape. And it can think whatever it wants to on the inside. It can have OCD in here. It can have depression in here. It can have escapism in here. It can have whatever you want in here. And I know this sounds kind of weird, but like I've even had success with this, especially with psychosis and psychotic disorders. So these are people like, for example, with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, and they're hallucinating, they're delusional. And what we've sort of discovered in psychiatry is you can't like really fix the delusion inside the mind, or it's very difficult to. So when I'm sort of working with patients who have psychosis or are delusional, instead of trying to fix the thing inside the mind, what I train them to do is get control of the mind as a whole. Okay? So then the question becomes, okay, how do you get control of the mind as a whole? And so this is something that I've steered a little bit clear of, but I honestly think it's like one of the most useful concepts that I've ever learned. The reason I've steered clear from it is because I don't have good scientific support for it. So I tend to steer clear of some of the more spiritual ideas that are not scientifically supported, but, you know, I think it's the best answer. So what I'm going to share with y'all today is the idea of the gunas. So in the yogic conception of the world, there are 3 gunas or qualities. And those are tamas, rajas, and sattvas. It's kind of weird, but what the yogis did in ancient India is basically classify all things into these 3 buckets. So these are the fundamental qualities. So tamas is that which is inert, slow, dull. Okay, rajas is that which is active, passionate, dynamic. And sattvas is balanced, calm, kind of equilibrium. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but they just sort of said if you look at all manner of things, you can basically divide them into these 3 qualities. So they looked at things like food. So some foods will lead to inertness, slowness, or dullness. Some foods will be active, like engage passion, or will make you more dynamic. And some foods will make your mind like calm and balanced and like sort of help you attain equilibrium. And so if you look at the diets of monks, so like the monk diet, doesn't really matter where you are, right? So like you can look at Catholic monks, you can look at Buddhist monks, you can look at Hindu monks. Essentially, all of them are going to have a more sattvic diet. So there are foods that we can eat that will sort of encourage this kind of thing. But it's not just foods, because you can look at like discussions on the internet, right? So there are going to be some communities which are going to push their... so let's talk about communities. So there are some communities which are going to lead to inertness in your life, right? So like if you hang out with these people, they're going to make you feel kind of like dull and inert, like your life is going to be like sort of a blur. There are some communities that will make you feel active and passionate, right? So like politically active communities, you know, regardless of what you kind of agree or disagree with, but like if you look at protesters, right? So protesters are not balanced and calm. They're like very active and passionate and dynamic and, you know, things like that. So like there's some communities that will make you dull and inert. Some things will sort of activate you and sort of engage your passion. And some things will sort of calm you down and sort of like help you attain balance and equilibrium, right? So there's like, it's kind of weird, but they sort of like looked at the world and they were like, okay, these are the 3 buckets of stuff. And so if you're someone who's kind of stuck in your life, like can't get control of your mind, what we really want you to do is move from tamas to rajas first and rajas to sattvas eventually. I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but this is sort of like the goal of what we're trying to do here, okay? So then the question is, okay, so how do I get control of my mind? So now we're going to get to how to control it, okay? So what we're going to do is kind of a linear process where we're going to start with one thing that will enable us to do the other thing, which will enable us to do the next thing. So the first thing is if you want to, your mind wants, so here's you and here's your mind. And you guys fight, right? So, and this is something, in order to overcome your mind, you need something called willpower. So the first question is, how do I get willpower, right? Like what's something that I can do to improve my willpower? So they did a really interesting study, I don't remember the citation, where they looked at teenagers in high school and looked at their sugar consumption. And what they essentially found is that how unhealthy teenagers eat is influenced by lots of different things, right? So your environment and things like that. But there's one variable which is quickly changeable, which will almost instantly alter your dietary habits. Can anyone guess what's the one thing that you can do to eat healthier? Anyone know? It's not availability. Ah, very good. Sleep. Excellent. Okay. So willpower is a diminishing resource. That's number one. We know this, okay? So if you guys have heard me talk about the beet versus cookie study, so I'll quickly explain this study. I won't go into too much detail. So a group of psychologists basically wanted to measure willpower. And what they did is they took two participants, so group number 1 and group number 2. And in group number 1, they were in a waiting room, and they put a tray of boiled beets in front of them. And in the other group, they put a tray of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. And the people were given the explicit instruction, you are not allowed to eat this. This is for the people. There's like a party after we're done with this research study. So we're just like putting this stuff in the room. You cannot eat it. No eating. Okay. So thankfully, no one was a degenerate and ate it anyway. So everyone followed the instructions, but then the real test came afterward. So afterward, they go into a room and they're faced with an impossible task. And they basically saw how long until people like gave up to on the task. So like how much willpower could they exert to force themselves into the situation? And what they found is that the willpower was lower with the cookie group than it was with the beet group. Okay. And so what they sort of essentially concluded, and based on this, there have been other studies that have been done, is that like when you're resisting the cookies, you're actually burning your willpower resource. And then you kind of run out of willpower faster than other people. Okay. So where does willpower, how do we regenerate it? We regenerate it with sleep. So if you want to control your mind, the first thing, the most important thing that you can do is sleep. Okay. So quick tips. We had a whole lecture on sleep recently. I think it was even like close to 2 hours or something. So definitely go watch that. But I would say, the key thing to remember is waking up is easier than going to sleep. Because you can force yourself to wake up, right? And then you can have caffeine if you really need it. That's okay. And then you kind of spend your day just kind of chilling or whatever. Wait until you're exhausted at night, and then, you can fall asleep. So I like to also have a heavy meal before sleep. We're going to teach you guys a technique called Shavasana today, is meditation. And then the other thing that you can do before sleep is audiobook, helps a lot. Right? There's other things like weighted blankets, etc. But the first thing that you've got to do is get your sleep under control. And I don't mean sleep perfectly every single day. I mean that the more you can improve your sleep, the more willpower you're going to have. And the more willpower you're going to have, the easier it's going to be to do number 2. So now you've slept, let's say like you work on it for like 3 or 4 days. You're able to sleep 1 more hour per night. That's like more restful. Like we're not saying you have to fix everything, but it's tough for like a couple days. You get into the routine. So just start with sleep. Okay. That's number 1. Number 2 is food. So what the yogis sort of discovered is that the simplest way to have a more balanced mind, a less tamasic mind, and by the way, giving into escapism is like a tamasic mind, right? So what do I mean by that? It means that the escapist mentality leads to dullness and inertness. It moves you to inaction. So you're just sitting at home playing video games instead of working, right? So what we want to do is like remove tamas from our life. So if you have motivational problems, the less tamasic you become, the better off you're going to be. Okay. I use this a lot in clinical practice, but there's not good science behind it. There's some good science, actually. There's some science, but it's a little bit of a stretch. So adjust your food. Okay. So this is where like, now that we have a little bit more willpower, hopefully what we can do is make like a couple of healthier choices. I'm not saying go paleo. I'm not saying go keto. You can do that if you want to and you're able to. But there's a lot of stuff that we can do for food that will actually make our mind like much more light, airy, and like able to work. Okay? So here's just a couple of things. So move from cola to seltzer. So we don't need that added sugar and stuff. I'm not saying you can't have a cola from time to time, but in general, if you regularly consume soda, I'd say make the shift to seltzer. So what I found when trying to help people overcome like soda addiction, basically, is that the bubbles. So like anytime you're trying to overcome an addictive behavior, you have to understand that overcoming the addictive behavior involves multiple components. So when I'm trying to help people with smoking cessation, it turns out that cigarettes are addictive for 3 reasons. Okay, number 1 is the nicotine. This everyone is aware of. But here's the problem. Here's where people trip up. They don't realize that nicotine or cigarettes are addicted for more reasons than nicotine, right? So the second thing is that it gives people a break. So people who smoke cigarettes will take like smoke breaks. And this is a huge part of like why like cigarettes are so addictive is like you step out of your office, like you step outside, you like spend 5 minutes just like chilling, relaxing, kind of like having fun. Sometimes it's also a source of like socialization, right? So like you and your coworkers go out for a smoke break. That's a huge part of the advantage of a cigarette. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that there's like what's this called? There's a tactile addiction too to cigarettes. It's kind of weird, but a big part of cigarettes is like fiddling with your hands. So what I found is that when people are like craving nicotine, right? So if you're like craving nicotine, it's interesting because you can give people gum that will like supplement the nicotine. You can give them a patch that will supplement the nicotine, but that doesn't cure the smoking cessation, right? Instead, like actually what you kind of discover is that like so replacing the nicotine, if we check this box, people still like relapse and continue smoking. And why is that? It's because smoking is doing more than just the nicotine. So there's the social aspect. There's the like taking a break, like, you know, once an hour, once every other hour to like go outside and like have a smoke. There's the tactile addiction. So oddly enough, if I want to help someone stop smoking, you know, I may give them nicotine gum, sure. But a real plan also involves sunflower seeds, right? And like meditation breaks or walks. And the most success I've had sort of helping people overcome these is to like target all of the aspects of the addiction. I know it sounds kind of bizarre, but what I found really works well is you tell people to carry around sunflower seeds. And what they do is they just like sunflower seeds are really tactile. Like you do something with your hands. So what they'll do is every 2 hours, they'll go outside with a handful of sunflower seeds. They'll crack them. It's sort of like this very like simple, like mind numbing kind of activity. And they'll like crack them. They'll eat the sunflower seeds. They'll, you know, spit out the shells, and like something about stepping outside of your office every 2 hours, chewing some nicotine gum, which tastes awful. And then like, you know, you spit the sunflower seeds and all that kind of stuff out, and somehow works. So in that same way, if we're trying to overcome cola addiction, what we want to do is actually like don't remove all the elements, right? So there's the sweetness, but then the carbonation is actually a big part of it. There's just like you burp afterward, and that kind of feels like good in some ways, and like you have it with food and it helps you burp, especially if you're eating unhealthy things. So there's like weird kind of physiologic signals that you can sort of take advantage of. That's sort of a tangent into like smoking cessation and stuff. The first thing is like replace cola with seltzer, okay? The thing is just like try to eat healthy stuff. I know it sounds like so simple, and I know that we don't give you guys concrete solutions, so we're going to kind of do that today. So another like example is just like apples and peanut butter. So I think the key to, or another kind of nut butter, the key to like starting to eat a little bit more sattvic or a little bit more like balancing or healthier is to make small changes that don't require a whole lot of willpower. Now you have a little bit more willpower from the sleep, but apples and peanut butter is like delicious. It'll like fill you up for a while. It'll increase your satiety. It'll be healthy. I'm not saying you have to use the organic stuff to start, right? By all means, like get some peanut butter with salt in it. Like it's not that big of a deal. I've already talked about oatmeal before, but I think oatmeal is like one of the most OP meals that you can eat that's quite sattvic, right? So oatmeal is going to be high in fiber, and you can make it taste delicious, like with maple syrup, berries, cinnamon, or you can go for a savory oatmeal, which I didn't, you know, this was a big discovery. Soy, green onion, tomato, and sesame oil. You'd be surprised. It's almost like a congee kind of thing. So like this is where, you know, you just start to make like a couple of changes, and it's like, what's your like alternative to this, right? Is like, if you're going to go get like a breakfast sandwich from like a fast food restaurant, that's going to be incredibly tamasic, going to slow you down, make you sluggish, and you're screwed for the rest of the day, right? I know it's bizarre. The savory oatmeal really catches people. Like some people think that this is like, you're insane if you do this. But you don't always want to eat something sweet. And this is like, thing is like, this is delicious food, okay? And I'm going to give you guys my last one. My last sattvic thing, okay? That I haven't disclosed to y'all before. Butternut squash soup. This is the most OP, like oatmeal and butternut squash soup, I think are the most OP meals that you can make. So like butternut squash soup is like, it's delicious. I kid you not. And maybe we'll do like a cooking stream or something one day. And basically, you just take a butternut squash, you chop it in half, you drizzle it with olive oil and salt, you stick it in the oven, you roast it. Then what you do is you like scoop out all the squash, which is now soft. You stick it in a pot, or actually before you stick it in a pot, you take oil, garlic, onions, right? So you like fry that up for a little bit. This is actually a little bit tamsik, garlic and onions, but you know, we're getting there. Rajsik a little bit. It's healthy for your heart, so there's good, you know, there's good advantages to it. And you toss all that stuff in there. You can put in whatever else you want to. You can put in celery, you can put in tomatoes. I steer clear of things like potato, but you can stick some of that stuff in there. And you just cook it for a while. You can stick that stuff in the blender and you can blend it up and then you like season it, right? So the cool thing about soup is like you can add all kinds of stuff. So I'll put a little bit of salt in there. Smoked paprika goes a long way. It's going to have a lot of natural sweetness from the squash and the onion, so you don't need any sugar. I don't put cream and crap like that. I know a lot of recipes will like add cream, but like no, you just like, it's like a vegetable soup that's just amazing. It's like, and then a squeeze of lime. If you want to go crazy, you can put some stuff like cumin or garam masala or things like that. But I think just basically with this stuff, pepper, you can even stick a jalapeno in there if you want to. Like, this is delicious. You can also freeze some of this stuff if you want to. Right? So like you cook this stuff and it tastes amazing and you're getting like, you know, tons of nutrients and vegetables and stuff like that. And that will actually help you a lot. So it'll like clean out your mind. Okay. There's also a lot of stuff that we've talked about. You can find out this all in Dr. K's guide about gut brain health, right? So when you start to eat some of these things, it forms healthy gut bacteria. And as you form healthy gut bacteria, they make neurotransmitter precursors. And as you make neurotransmitter precursors like tryptophan and stuff like that, it can actually theoretically boost your serotonin level and things like that. So like there's a lot of like science behind some of this stuff. But now that we have good sleep, we can eat good food. Once we start to eat good food and our mind becomes less tamsik from that angle, then what we're going to do is number 3, get out of the house. Okay? Just get out of the house. Now, I know that weather permitting and depending on where you are, this may not, like if you're in like Ontario or like Michigan or something, it may be hard to like get out of the house. But as best as you can, like literally get out of the house. So even if it's going to a store or like whatever, like try as best as you can, try to get out of the house or get out of your room or do whatever you can. If it's freezing outside and you can't do that, you know, maybe you can't do that now, but at least when it starts to warm up, do the best that you can. There's all kinds of important stuff that happens here that's like physiologic. We've talked about this before. So plant aerosols are really good for mood, particularly anxiety. There's all kinds of other stuff like eye accommodation. So our eyes, if you think about the way that our eyes evolved, they did not evolve to look at things that were like 3 feet in front of me all day long. So you actually have these things called your ciliary muscles, which cause your eyes to contract the ciliary muscles contract. And so that alters the shape of your lens and your focal length. And then you kind of like are looking at close by. So the default position for your eye is not like 3 feet away. It's actually like further away. So you want to relax your ciliary muscles by walking outside. That's like literally all it takes, is then your eyes will naturally relax. They'll focus on far things. This can do all kinds of things like reduce headache. There's just all kinds of good stuff. There's some evidence that it actually improves vision over time. But that's it's like correlative evidence and cross-sectional. So we're not really sure about that. But get out of the house, right? So you'll get some fresh air and things like that. You also get moving. So we don't want to be like sedentary, okay? So the next thing that we're going to do, so now that we've gotten out of the house and we've gotten a little bit refreshed, we can actually do what most people are expecting, which is meditation and yoga. So what I'm going to recommend is 20 minutes of meditation practice a day. And I'd start with alternate nostril breathing. And then do Om chanting. Now you can mix it up if you want to, but if you're coming from the internet and this is your first exposure to us, these are the 2 things that I would recommend. Once again, there's a whole module about this in Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health. We teach you everything that you're going to need to know about meditation there. But these are the 2 things that I do, like 10 minutes each. Next thing that I'm going to say is 10 minutes. You can do more if you want to, of Surya Namaskar. So this is a set of 10 yoga postures that'll like super balance you out, right? So at the end of the day, like this, all of this stuff is only like an hour or two a day. Like cooking a meal, getting out of the house, and doing 30 minutes of meditation and yoga is like an hour a day. Or sorry, 2 hours a day, let's say. And so the interesting thing here is like, this is what it takes to get control of your mind. And if we go back to like this post, what we find is that, you know, like there's a lot of stuff here where like I can quit and join. I need to start doing this. My mind seems to spiral out of control. I want to run home and be comfortable in my bubble. Like all of these things, like you're losing to your mind. Like, sure, we can try to fix whatever is inside the mind. We can try to fix this if we want to. But if we just get control of the mind as a whole, you don't have to even overcome your fear of escapism. There's a part of your mind that will want to escape, and you'll just be like, yeah, we're not going to do that today. You don't even have to fix it. You can just have it. You can still like want to escape, and it won't like, once you're in control of your mind, once your willpower's there, once you're more sattvic and more balanced, you'll be able to resist your desires better. Now, on to a couple of advanced things, okay? So for those of you, because now I understand there are a lot of people in our community that do this, right? Apparently, we've got a bunch of oatmeal eaters in chat. So if you guys want more advanced stuff to discipline your mind, eventually you can absolutely go, you know, you can increase your meditation time and things like that, but I'm going to give you guys other practices. So obviously you can sleep better, you can eat more sattvic food, you can cut out meat if you want to, cut out, oh, by the way, marijuana and alcohol are both very, very tamasic. Liquor is actually a little bit more rajasic, but, you know, stimulants tend to be rajasic, so you want to cut out all those substances too. Or the other way to put it is, if you are using those substances, it makes sense to me that you're going to have trouble getting control of your mind. So other things that you can do, if you really want to control your mind, other things you can do. We've talked about this before. No devices in the toilet. Right? When you go do a number 2, you're just going to go in with no devices. Okay? Number 2. No devices while eating. Okay? All right, so let's talk about this for a second. So notice, first of all, the rebellion, right? So what part of you is rebelling? What part of you is like, oh my God, I can eat oatmeal, I can go to sleep on time, I can do 30 minutes of yoga, but you're telling me to not use my phone when I'm taking a dump? Like, look at the rebellion within you. Like, what are we talking about here, right? Like, what's the real cost to, like, not using your phone while you're in the bathroom? Or, like, not watching something while you eat? Like, just notice that. Like, that's really bizarre. I'm not asking you to, like, you know, go into debt. I'm not asking you to donate a kidney. I'm not asking you to, you know, adopt a child. I'm not like, there's no real like cost here, right? And this is why I picked this so specifically, because the only cost is like your mind rebelling. Like, it's just, your mind is like, oh no, we can't browse Reddit for like 5 minutes while I'm taking a dump, or 10 minutes. It's like, oh my God, how cruel. So this is a really, really prime example of like who's in control. Is it your mind or is it you? Now be careful, because if I say there's no cost, what your mind is going to do, it's going to be, but like, look at all the productive stuff I can do. Look at all, I have so much anime to watch. I have so many of these YouTube lectures on motivation to watch while I eat. It's me being productive. It's me being productive. That's like the last hallmark of the addicted mind, is like telling you some kind of good rationalization. So it's like, no, it will cost you something. No, the marijuana is good for my insomnia and my anxiety. No, we need it, bro. No, like, we don't need it. We're not like addicted, but like we need it. No, I'm sorry, we don't need it. But like, think about everything you're going to lose if you don't get it. That's what it is, right? That's the thought process, right? We don't need it. We're not really addicted, but it's just like, think about the efficiency, the loss in efficiency. Oh my God, we can't be inefficient. Oh, sure, like we can play video games for 8 hours a day, but like we've got to use those 5 minutes on the toilet to research jobs on LinkedIn, which is not what you do anyway, right? So like, these are the two things that if you want to get control of your mind, just like don't do devices while eating. And this is the bizarre thing, is once it feels really hard until you do it. And once you actually do it, like if you sit down with like, let's say a bowl of like butternut squash soup and you just eat it without doing anything, it tastes amazing. Like, you're going to have a wonderful experience. You're actually going to enjoy it. You don't even need the device. It feels actually really good. Like, go grab some apples and peanut butter. It's kind of nice where I live because I'm down south, like in the southern United States. But like, I'm going to step outside and have some apples and peanut butter. And like, you just sit outside in your backyard and you're just kind of like enjoying yourself. Like, it's great. Right? So here are the advanced techniques. Because as it turns out, you know, there are a lot of advanced people in our community. So you can try these two things. These are really great willpower building exercises. And generally speaking, we here at HG don't like, you know, emphasize the willpower route, but at the same time, it is like a really important route. We sort of emphasize understanding. So if you guys want to get control of your mind, here's how you do it, right? We can talk about the escapism and stuff like that. So questions? So, you know, people are asking about reading. So notice the last bastion of the mind. When all devices are removed, can I read? Can I read? So this is where, like, sure, you can read. You know, I think it's okay. But, like, why do you need to? Like, do you really need to read for that 5 or 10 minutes? There's like 24 hours in a day. You're sleeping for, let's say, like 6 to 9 of them. And like, you need it's like you poop maybe once a day. We're talking about like a 5-minute loss here, right? But desperate to what? Like, your mind. So notice that desperation. Notice how much your mind craves stimulation. So this is the key thing to understand, is that when you give in to that mind, that's the same thing as like quitting your job and going home. It assigns too much value to gaming and sleeping and hanging. So like, you don't want to give in to that value. Like, the more that you give in to what the mind wants, even in the smallest little way, you are creating a system where it's in control. So I'd say, like, don't do any of it. And then your mind is like, but then what am I going to do? And you're going to be bored for like 5 minutes. It's going to be 300 seconds. Count to 300 for me. And then your mind is like, eh. But if you literally want to know, how do I get control of my mind? There are some things that it wants and you tell it no. And then it whines and wheedles and tries to trick you. And if you let it trick you, you're not going to control it. It's going to control you. But if you do a good job, it'll listen. And then over time, it'll start listening more. And then you're going to tell it, like, it's going to be like, I want to play a video game. But now you've practiced, right? Now it's trained. So you're going to say, sorry, we're not going to play a video game right now. We're going to actually go exercise for an hour. And then after we're done exercising, then we're going to play a video game. And then you will discover something miraculous, which is after you train your mind to listen to you and then you play the video game after exercising, the video game is actually more fun than if you would have, like, once you, like, if you go work out and then you feel like kind of tired and exhausted, the numbers. If your mind is like tired from working out, like, the game is going to be more fun too. Okay? Counting game. Yes. Look at how the mind latches onto that. So notice what's happening now, chat. Here I am telling you how to get control of your mind, and what does your mind do? Quick, bring out the memes. Bring out the memes. Don't listen to what he's saying. Distract everyone. Start counting. Oh my God, we have to count. Anything but listening to this. Oh my God. Quickly, the memes. Let's say something funny. You see this? We're counting numbers. Oh my God. This is so funny. Did we distract ourselves enough so that we have to stay? We can use the cell phone in the bathroom now? Did we distract ourselves? Did we forget what we were talking about? Did it work? Quick, count more. Oh my God. Let's be funny and stop paying attention. Because that's what's happening, right? You guys see that? You're like, oh. Your mind is like, let's do this. It's going to be funny. I'm going to type 3 and 2. So funny. Now I'm going to type 33. Oh my God. It's so much fun. And thus do we stop learning and start giving in to the mind's desire to like meme and entertain itself. Right? Okay. Questions? Yeah, so I'll summarize. So let's go ahead and kind of do a quick summary, okay? So a lot of times when we're confronted with things like escapism, our goal is to fix the escapism on the inside of our mind, right? So people will say things like, oh, I want to escape. And then the next thing that sort of happens, we can be depressed, we can be anxious, whatever. Our solutions tend to be to try to fix the inside of the mind so that we no longer have to deal with it. But there's another pathway that we have, which is to not fix what's on the inside of the mind, but just get control of the mind as a whole. So the mind does what we want it to, whether it feels a particular way or not. So I'll give you guys kind of an example. If I'm anxious about going to a party, what I can do is I can try to deal with my internal anxiety so I'm no longer anxious going to the party. Or what I can do is just command my mind and say, hey, we're going to go to the party anyway. It's okay if you're a little bit anxious, like not a big deal. We're going to do it anyway. And then the mind will be like super, super upset. But if we've trained our mind properly, it'll do it anyway. So we don't even need to be like, we don't have to fix the inside of our mind. We can just control it. So controlling our mind involves understanding this concept of the gunas, which is what a lot of this stuff is baked into. But this idea that different kinds of activities or exercises or foods that we engage in will make our mind more inert, dull, or slow, more active, passionate, or dynamic, or more balanced, calm, or in a state of equilibrium. And so how do we do that? It starts with sleep. Once we sleep more or sleep healthier, we're going to have more willpower. And then we can start making some of the other changes that we need to make. So if I had started by saying adjust your diet and you're not sleeping properly, like it's going to be hard to stick to a diet, right? So now that we're sleeping properly, we can make easy adjustments to our diet. We don't want to eat like super untasty foods. We want to find light, healthy foods that also taste good. So the three things are moving to seltzer, moving to apples and peanut butter, oatmeal, butternut squash soup. These are just some examples, okay? Now that we've eaten well, so our mind is going to be a little bit more compliant once it gets these kind of good, healthy, light foods. So we're going to feel like, because sometimes you just don't like, I don't feel like getting out of the house. I just I don't feel like it, right? And some of that sentiment, that feeling of not wanting to get out of the house actually has to do with diet. Because if you eat like crap, you don't feel like doing anything. But if you eat like healthy food, you're going to feel like more energetic. So then get out of the house. And then once you're out of the house, you get a breath of fresh air, then you can start doing like meditation and yoga. You're going to do 20 minutes of meditation and 10 minutes of yoga. And then if you've done all that stuff, if you've got the basics down, you've got a job, you do meditate every day if you're like one of those chads, then you want to move on to hard mode, then you can do no devices in the toilet and no devices while eating. Like don't watch anything while you're eating. Just eat. Right? And then everyone goes to like, everyone's totally fine. Oh yeah, like eating oatmeal, like I can handle that. But asking me to give up my device, no. And then what we see is that the mind wants it, right? Because what it wants to avoid is like, oh my God, like I need it. The mind wants it so bad. So that's how you get control of your mind, by doing limited things that sort of make it easy for your mind to be more compliant, right? So this stuff up here is going to shape the mind. And then as we move down to the advanced techniques, now that the mind is more pliable, you'll have set up a situation where it will require less willpower because you'll be sleeping well, eating well, things like that. Okay? Step 3, become a Buddha. Absolutely. All right. So someone's asking you, how do you deal with hours of boredom when you're so used to stimulation? It's torture. So you don't start with hours, you start with minutes, right? So like, how do you deal with hours of boredom? I'm not sure, but here's the other thing. If you get like tons of stimulation through technology, for example, you're bored anyway. You're just stimulated and bored, and you're dull and bored. You're like thumbsick and stimulated. It's like terrible, right? So you start by like small amounts of calculated withdrawal from like stimulating stuff. Start small. It's like, how do you lift 100 pounds? You start by lifting 5. Same way you do anything in life. So is listening to music when leaving the house fine? Yeah, sure. Listen to music. It's okay. Do that for a while and then, try not listening to music and see which one you prefer. Okay? All right. Okay. So if someone's saying, hi, doctor, I'm a NEET, what do? You do this. Start with this, right? This is where, like, then your mind will be in a state to do the other things. Okay? All right. Next, we're going to talk about overcoming powerlessness. Okay? Next up. Okay. Okay. Can Dr. K talk about the epidemic of people feeling powerless and how to overcome this feeling? Internal versus external locus of control. I originally discovered this phenomenon in the book Free to Learn by Dr. Peter Gray. It makes the case that free childhood play is vital to development and has been suppressed in modern times starting roughly in the 70s and 80s, mostly due to schooling and changes in parenting styles. One point of research that really struck me was the study on children and teenagers' mental health between the 1950s and 2010s. It showed a drastic increase in a variety of mental health problems like depression, anxiety, shame, low self-worth. The factor that stood out most to me was a shift away from internal locus of control to external. Internal locus of control means I feel capable of making decisions over my own life. And external locus of control means I feel powerless to the outside world or authority figures. The study the book references on this phenomenon took surveys of kids 9 to 14 and college students between 1960 and 2002. So for both age groups over this period, average scores shifted dramatically away from internal towards the external end of the scale, so much so, in fact, that the average young person in 2002 was more external than were 80% of young people in the 1960s. And Dr. Gray says further on this, when people believe they have little or no control over their fate, they become anxious. Something terrible can happen to me at any time and I will be unable to do anything about it. When the anxiety and sense of helplessness becomes too great, people become depressed. There's no use trying. I'm doomed. Research has also shown that those with an external locus of control are less likely to take responsibility for their own health, their own futures, their communities, than are those with an internal locus. I would really appreciate hearing Dr. K talk about this topic and what we could do about it in our own lives. I'm finding that a lot of my relationship problems are because most people I've met are very external this way. They end up aimless and just doing whatever is handed to them rather than exploring what they really want to do in life. I want to create, innovate, build new things, and solve real-world problems. But I've found a lot of unreliable and irresponsible people that end up destroying our projects and destroying their relationships. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but so let's start by understanding this, okay? Yeah, I thought it was interesting that my relationship problems are because most people I've met are external. This is an external locus of control statement. Y'all see that? I want to create, innovate, and build new things, but a lot of people are unreliable and irresponsible and destroying our relationships. You guys get that? It's interesting, right? So it talks a lot. So, but this is fair because this person is sort of saying, you know, there's an epidemic of this and how do we overcome this feeling? This person is kind of saying that we've all shifted in this direction and we're doing it here too. So let's kind of summarize this. So to begin with, this is a very understandable view to have, right? So a lot of times as we go through life, we look around and we see that there are all kinds of unsolvable problems around us. The unsolvable problems that we face, and this sort of makes sense. I'm not trying to devalue what this person is saying because they're right? So if you open up any source of information about the outside world, what are you going to get hammered with? You're going to get hammered with climate change. The economy is going to hell. Online dating is an absolute mess. Everything around us appears to be screwed and collapsing. So as things around us appear to be screwed and collapsing, because these are very real things, right? Climate change is not in my head. Climate change is actually happening. The economy, inflation. So I saw that there was a 16% increase in the consumer price index in the United States this year, which is ridiculous. That's a real thing that affects me, right? How am I supposed to manage all of these things? And now everyone has moved to online dating. What am I supposed to do about that? I can't fix the world. And so as we get inundated with lots of information about the external world and how the external world is like going to crap, we can naturally feel very powerless. We can naturally say, like, what can I do in the face of this? And the biggest one is COVID, right? Like, what can I do in the face of COVID? Like, how am I supposed to survive given all this stuff on the outside? And so if you're in this situation, it makes sense. Like, there is absolutely a way to start to navigate this. There's absolutely a way to feel less overwhelmed. There's absolutely a way to feel power and take agency. And we're going to talk a little bit about locus of control, and we're going to talk a little bit about passive versus active challenges, because this person also kind of mentions that, having a bunch of external locus of control leads to anxiety. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I don't quite agree. There's a piece missing there. And then once we feel anxious and overwhelmed, then we procrastinate, we don't really do anything, and then we just continue to get like bodied by the world, right? As I like procrastinate, I don't feel like doing anything, I feel overwhelmed, I don't know where to start. And so I like kind of sit there and I don't do anything, and then I just get slammed by like more and more crap because I'm not taking an active role in my life. So how do you switch? How do you switch from an external locus of control to an internal locus of control? Okay? So let's talk about it. So locus of control. The first thing is I don't entirely agree with the characterization of the post. So a locus of control is basically the concept of like what is responsible for a given situation. So there's an internal locus of control and there's an external locus of control. And what that sort of means is that when a human being encounters an issue, their mind tends to default to one of these two loci of control. This particular book or whatever seems to emphasize that internal locus of control is superior to external locus of control, but I'd be very curious whether the person that wrote this book is a clinician or not, because in my experience, internal locus of control can be just as damaging. So let me give you guys an example of a damaging internal locus of control. The reason that this person broke up with me is because I'm a worthless human being. The reason that I can't find a job is because I have no skills that are like marketable. The reason that I'm stuck in life is because I'm lazy and undisciplined, right? So like lazy, undisciplined, low self-esteem, right? The reason that they didn't invite me to the party is because I'm not fun to be around. So there are all kinds of like depressive thoughts that have actually an emphasis on the internal locus of control. It's always my fault. You also see this with people with like narcissistic parents or tiger parents. It's all your fault that you're not studying well. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. This is actually an emphasis on internal locus of control. So like if you talk to a kid who has tiger parents, it has never crossed the kid's mind that the reason they don't get a 4.0 is because their parents aren't supportive enough, right? Like it never crosses their mind that like, oh, like maybe it's not my fault. Maybe it's actually my parents' fault because all my parents ever do is yell at me and tell me that I need a 4.0, but none of them ever actually like sit down and help me study. They never actually ask me like, what do I need to get a 4.0, right? Does that make sense? So internal locus of control isn't superior to external locus of control. I also see a lot of internal locus of control focus with CEOs, actually. So I do a lot of work, less so now, but with like executives and startups and entrepreneurs and things like that. And what I oftentimes find is that CEOs have a very harsh internal locus of control. You also see this with successful streamers, where the company didn't do well this 6 months and it's my fault. If I had worked harder, if I had done more research, if I had done this, if I was like more empathic, if I could be a better leader, there are all kinds of statements that like people will attribute to themselves. Like CEOs do this all the time, where they'll beat themselves up with a heavy, heavy internal locus of control. The success or failure of the company has nothing to do with COVID, has nothing to do with the economy, has everything to do with how awesome I am or how much I suck. And since the company isn't doing very well, I must suck. This is an internal locus of control. External locus of control. The fault is outside of me, right? This is where, the reason I didn't get the job is because, the interviewer was racist. Or the interviewer, there was an applicant, there was nepotism. That's why I didn't get the promotion. Because, my coworker was, plays politics. The reason that I can't get a date is because of feminism, right? Like there's all kinds of things that people will come up with. Oh yeah, like the world is screwed. Like the reason that I'm stuck at home is because of the world. So this is where like we look at things like COVID. Oh, I'm screwed. Climate change. I'm screwed. I can't do anything, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So we'll attribute all kinds of things to external factors. And so it's like the key thing is it's never my fault. It's always the world's fault. And then when you have an internal locus of control, it's actually the exact opposite. Always my fault. Never the world's fault. Yeah, maybe the reason that relationship didn't work out has nothing to do with you. Maybe the person wasn't ready to be in a relationship. But if you have a very heavy internal locus of control, you're going to blame yourself all the time. Okay? So, how do we navigate this? The key thing is that the most successful people are the ones that can move between the two loci of control. So the key is to be able to shift your locus of control. And oftentimes when I work with people, what I help them do is do this. So they'll come in and they'll have these kinds of thoughts, right? We'll have the CEO who says, oh my God, it's all my fault. Or I'll have the kid of tiger parents. And they'll be like, oh my God, it's all my fault. And what I'll help them do is I'll help them recognize, oh, actually, like, you know, maybe your company is actually doing really well. Even though you guys are not making as much profit, 2 of your competitors have gone out of business because of COVID. And the fact that y'all are still standing, like maybe the reason you're losing money is because of COVID, but the fact that you still exist is actually a victory, right? So there are actually external factors which we need to think about. Maybe the reason that you don't get a 4.0 is because you have parents that aren't encouraging. And even on the days that you did get, when you got a 95 on the test, all your parents could say is, but why didn't you get 100, right? So you have parents that always look at the 5 questions that you got wrong instead of the 95 questions that you got right. So maybe that's partially responsible for your like how motivated you are to succeed, because you actually don't see any benefit from success. So as we start to like help people shift their locus of control, they start to adopt healthier things. The opposite is true as well. So people who are focused on the external locus of control, like, oh, like if you keep on saying that your interviewer is racist or that, you know, there's nepotism or people are playing politics, maybe you're not actually focusing on what you could be doing. Maybe the reason you didn't get promoted is because your work isn't as good as your coworkers, right? Maybe you could be studying more or working harder or, you know, not half-assing a particular thing. Maybe what you call playing politics is just like being a good team player. Maybe the reason you didn't get promoted is not because of politics. It's because when your boss asks everyone, who do you want, who would you want to lead your team? No one says you. And you call that playing politics, but like maybe you actually wouldn't be good as like a manager because you don't have good people skills. So there's all kinds of things that, that are at play here. And the main thing about locus of control, it's not that necessarily internal is worse or better than external. I sort of disagree with that. But the main thing is to be able to shift each one. So the other thing to understand is that if you're stuck, ask yourself why, and then shift your locus of control. Okay. So this is something, by the way, that our coaches are trained in. So our coaches are actually really good at doing this kind of thing, where this isn't something we talk a lot about on stream, but this is one of the key techniques that I think is responsible for some of our good outcomes, which is like coaches are very, very good at helping people like shift their locus of control. So if you're stuck, shift your locus of control and then ask yourself once again, what can you do? So if you're blaming yourself, ask yourself like, what is responsible on the outside? If you're blaming the outside, ask yourself, what could I be doing differently? So whichever way your mind automatically thinks about things, you need to shift it. Because the interesting thing is that your mind will naturally try to solve problems, right? So if I beat myself up, I'll think about, okay, maybe I need to like get more disciplined or I need to become less lazy. So it'll look for solutions internally if it thinks it's an internal problem. But it'll ignore all the low-hanging fruit externally and vice versa. So if I blame the rest of the world, I'll try to think about, oh my God, this boss needs to change, or I need to move jobs. I need to move into a company that doesn't play politics. You'll find all these like drastic solutions on the outside while ignoring low-hanging fruit internally. Oh, maybe I just need to learn how to be like a better team player, right? So this is locus of control. Now there's a key thing here because I don't think that locus of control in and of itself leads to powerlessness and anxiety. So I think the key thing here is, let me just figure out how to say this properly. I think the key thing here is going to be actually figuring out active and passive challenges. So if we conclude that an external locus of control results in anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, and feeling powerless, right? That's our problem. So it turns out, in my opinion at least, these feelings are not necessarily due to locus of control, but are due to something called active versus passive challenges. And the issue here is that a lot of the external locus of control things are similar or overlap with passive challenges. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about active versus passive challenges. So there are some people in life who feel like they're getting owned right, left, and center. Right. So there's so many problems in the world: COVID, climate change, the economy, online dating, student debt, if you're in the US, right? If you're in other parts of the world, maybe corruption, who knows? There's just so much that's wrong with the world that I can't do anything about it. So then the question becomes like, how does this person navigate life? Okay? So like, what do they kind of think about, and how do they, GG. How do they approach their day? So we're going to go sans iPad now, okay? So like, there are some people who go through life and they just kind of get like bodied right, left, and center. And what do I mean by that? It's like they just get owned. So like, it's like, you know, I live my life and like I get a pay cut at my job because of COVID, getting owned there. My parents are sick and don't take care of themselves, so I have to like go over to their house every day and make sure they take their medicine and things like that. I have no control there. Like, I just have to do what I have to do. Like, life is just sending this crap my way. And by the way, like, online dating is super toxic and like wears on my mental health. And like, there's no choice. I have to, because I don't want to be alone. So I have to like participate in this online dating process. I just kind of get screwed over and over and over again. So a passive challenge is a challenge that is sent your way that you don't choose. Okay. So passive challenge happens to us. It's work, by all means, but it happens to you, okay? And then active challenge is something I pick. Okay? So it's like, I'm gonna do this. Both of them are work, but a passive challenge happens to us, and an active challenge is something that I pick. And if we feel overwhelmed in life, there's one reason. When our passive challenges exceed our active challenges, we lose agency, we feel powerless, and then we lose motivation. But I wouldn't call this necessarily external locus of control. I would say that this is due to passive challenges being greater than active challenges. So when life sends you more crap than you send towards yourself, you tend to lose agency, and then you feel powerless, and then you like lose all motivation, right? Because like, here's the problem, is like life is sending all this stuff our way. And so what can I do about climate change? I can't do anything about climate change. What can I do about COVID? Well, I can't really do anything about COVID. What can I do about online dating? Well, I can't really like fix online dating. And so what we tend to do is we tend to attribute all of our problems to these external things. They tend to be actually like passive challenges. And then as our passive challenges outweigh our active challenges, we lose control of our life, we start to feel powerless, and we lose all motivation. So then the question is, okay, like, how do I fix this? And the key is actually going to be adopting more active challenges, which is kind of weird. So there's another thing that happens here, is when our passive challenges exceed our active challenges, we also feel anxious. And what is anxiety? Anxiety is the inability to control things, right? So it's like, I'm worried that this could happen to me. I'm worried that that could happen to me. I'm worried that this could happen to me. And so if you kind of think about the experience of someone with anxiety, there's someone who is on the receiving end of stuff happening to them. Oh, what if this person does this? What if this person does that? Then what am I going to do? I can't do anything about it, right? So they're on the receiving end of stuff. So that's where anxiety comes from. This then gets even worse because not only are you kind of like feeling anxious, but then you have all of this, like, I know it sounds kind of weird, but as you lose motivation and act less, this is going to sound kind of weird. Energy builds up in the mind because it has no outlet, right? Because you're not motivated, but your mind is still thinking. That's what I mean by energy in the mind. The amount of thoughts in your head, they just sort of bounce around for a while. You end up getting into thought loops. And then like that energy just like manifests as anxiety. I know this sounds kind of weird, but this is like literally how it works. So when I have a problem in life and all I do is think about it, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but the thinking about it just keeps going. Like there's no, like the energy of your mind has nowhere to vent or decompress out of. So the anxious thought just bounces around in your head because there's like a bunch of energy in there and you feel powerless, you feel not motivated. So you're not like externalizing any of that energy. It just bounces around in your head and tortures you all the time. So this results in feeling anxious, okay? So this is kind of interesting because then like, what's the solution? I know it's kind of bizarre, but the solution is to increase your active challenges, okay? The solution is kind of weird, is to do more stuff and like take responsibility for like more things. So let's use online dating as an example. Okay? So I'm single because online dating is shallow. Let's assume that that's true for a moment. And I'm not in shape. Right? So like I can't find someone because like I'm not in shape. And so then someone may you may look at this and you may say like, oh wow, like this is true, right? So like, and then this person gets motivated and they say, I need to get into shape. Okay? So this may seem on the surface like, first of all, you could call this external locus of control. Okay? And this person may seem motivated. They may say like, yeah, I need to get into shape. This isn't motivation. This is just an arbitrary goal. So the goal, what's actually happening here is this is a passive challenge. This is a passive challenge. People won't date me because online dating. But this is really just a way to fix this thing. It's still actually technically a passive challenge and an external locus of control. Because what you're doing is you're saying, I need to get into shape to accommodate this external thing. The active challenge is actually quite different. So what is an active challenge here? The active challenge is going to be like, I'm going to get into shape. For myself, right? It's not to accomplish anything. It's not to accommodate anything in the external world. It's not because of online dating. Like I'm going to pick something in my life and I'm going to make a change at it. This is something that I'm choosing for myself. And now this is night and day, even though in both scenarios, let's say both of these people start exercising, but what happens in their mind is going to be drastically different. So if I'm getting into the shape for the purpose of building an online profile, and I do 5 push-ups, that's going to be insufficient. People will still reject me. Or even if I lose 5 pounds and I update my profile and I still get rejected, my mind is going to tell me, see, it didn't work. Oh my God, this is so hard. I can't believe it. Why do we even bother? I knew it wouldn't work. Oh my God. So even progress with a passive challenge can feel like very, very disappointing. And you still don't feel like you're in control, right? Because like, even though I got in shape, I did what I could to make people date me, but they still wouldn't date me. So I might as well not bother. It's going to can't, like, it's going to destroy my motivation. I'm not going to feel like doing anything. Similar, like on the flip side, if we look at an active challenge, I'm going to get into shape for myself. And then if you lose 5 pounds, that's a victory for you. You don't care about the rest of the world. This is something that I chose to do, and I'm going to go ahead and do it. And when I see progress, I get to see a little bit of progress. I can have a little bit of pride. And this has me leaving with a sense of agency, right? Because I chose to do something for myself, and I did it. I did it for myself. And so the interesting thing is, even though like working out, like the actions are the same, it's adopting the active challenge that changes the way that you look at the result. So let's look at another example. Writing. So there are a lot of people in our community that have a lot of the basics down. So let's talk about creative pursuits, right? I want to write a book. And so this is also where, like, you know, you can start to think a little bit about outcomes and things like that. But when you sort of adopt the active challenge, I'm going to write 5 pages or 2 pages. Let's say 2 pages a day. It's not about what the, like, if all of this stuff is true, let's just assume for a moment that all this crap is true. Okay? And we'll talk about like social media and stuff in a second. So in the face of all of this crap, which you can't do anything about, you can't do anything about this, right? And every day you like log on to the internet and you see this. So your mind is literally spending 90 or let's say 100% of its time looking at this stuff. And then you feel like you have no agency because you can't fix those problems. Now, if I take on an active challenge and I say, I'm going to write 2 pages a day, and then your mind is going to be like, but what about all this stuff? And you're like, I don't really care about that. I'm just going to write 2 pages a day. So now what we're doing is we're spending 10% of our time doing this. And suddenly, this is only 90%. And then as you start exercising, that's another 10%. And this becomes 80%. Right? And over time, as the number of active challenges increases, the number of passive challenges is going to sort of like, it's going to be like occupying less space in your mind. And with each of these things, you're going to increase in agency, purpose, and as a result, motivation. Right? And you're going to feel less overwhelmed because you're doing something. You're not actually solving any of these problems, but in your mind, it's weird how it works. Like you're doing something. You're like doing something, right? And the problem with this post is that like these people aren't doing anything. And so they start to feel overwhelmed and anxious. Now let's look at it from an energetic perspective. So remember, the problem with anxiety is that this stuff bounces around in your head and you end up with thought loops, right? So like as you start doing stuff, the energy leaves the mind, and then your anxiety will decrease as a result. I know it's kind of bizarre, but you'll just like, and so this is why there are studies that show that exercise alleviates anxiety. Why is that? There may be all kinds of physiologic mechanisms and stuff like that. But I think a simple part of it is that as the energy gets vented from your body and being, right? Because body and mind are connected, like you're just not, like the thoughts are not bouncing around in your head as bad. I know it sounds super bizarre, but if y'all struggle with thought loops and anxiety, go and exercise and just see what happens to your mind. Your mind will literally be calmer and slower. So if we really want to start feeling less powerless, what we need to do is fix the balance between active and passive challenges. Because life is going to throw all kinds of crap at us. And if all we're doing in life is like letting life throw its crap at us, which we still handle, right? So if like if a family member gets COVID because they weren't vaccinated, like I'm still going to go take care of them, but it feels bad. I don't feel like even though I'm doing stuff, I have no sense of agency or control over my life. And that's because I'm just getting like crapped on by all these different dimensions in life. So the solution to that, bizarrely, is to start to take on more that you choose, right? I'm going to start making my life what I want it to be instead of getting owned by all this crap constantly. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but like this is literally how you put together your life. Is an appreciation of active challenges, and then like all that crap goes together, right? So as I start to do more, I vent energy from my mind, I feel less anxious. I'm like making progress. So I feel like I've got control over my life. Since I start getting control over my life, I have control over my life. So then I like feel less powerless. And as I feel less powerless, holy crap, I can actually make changes in my life. That's where motivation comes from. And then you start doing even more. Because if you look at people, right, there's like not everyone is the same. But there seem to be like these two camps of people. One are the Chads of life. Like we have a term for them. Do you guys get this? We have on the internet, we've taken this like concept, this psychological concept, and we've even put a name to it. We've divided people into two camps. Right? The Chads and the virgins, I guess. I don't know. And so what we've noticed is that there are like some people out there who seem to like do it all, right? Or do a large part of it, right? So they eat healthy, they're professionally successful, they have good relationships, like they seem to have everything. And then there's the other camp that like play games all day or like watch YouTube all day, like don't eat healthy, aren't in shape, don't engage in relationships, you know, like, and it's just so shocking. How can the world be so different? How can you have such different experiences of life? And it can't, you guys get that? It can't be like 1,000 variables, right? Like generally speaking, if you see a phenomenon in the world, like it gets reduced down to like simple stuff. So you can take all the most complex orbits in the movement of every heavenly body in the universe, and like basically it comes down to one force, gravity, right? Sure, there's like nuclear force and things like that, but generally speaking, it's like all gets reduced to a simple thing. And so we can look at a very complex successful life and a very complex unsuccessful life, and it actually boils down to basically one thing. It's the sense of agency, power, and control. It's the sense of motivation. And then what happens is people sort of attribute that lack of motivation to laziness or being undisciplined. And they say like, I'm lazy, and they're not lazy, therefore GG, right? But the truth is that there are people who used to be lazy who are no longer lazy. I'm sort of one of them in a sense, because I'm still lazy actually. But what I mean by that is there are people who used to be unsuccessful. I'm equally lazy, it's just I'm more successful now. And the difference is like starting to take on active challenges, right? Like making that decision for me, the first step was going to India. It's like I was failing out of classes, couldn't find any like striking out in terms of dating. Like sure, I went on a couple dates and would go to parties and stuff, but like no meaningful relationships, failing out of classes, like not taking care of myself physically, playing a bunch of video games. So like, what's the first thing that I did that turned things around? I chose to go to India, right? I was like, I need to do something. And that one thing, it's not even going to India. I mean, going to India was great for a lot of reasons, but it was the taking control of my life. And then I did something else drastic after I finished college. It's like, I'm going to pack 2 suitcases. I'm going to book a one-way ticket to Boston. And I'm broke. I have no money. I have nowhere to live. But like, I'm going to go. And it was like one of the most impactful decisions I ever made. I was desperate. And I like did something crazy. Like there was no safety net, nothing like that. But it's taking control of your life, like actively choosing something. It can be hard. Like it's hard. Like going to India was very difficult. Going to Boston for the first time was very difficult. Right? It's like, it's not easy. And so what everyone thinks is that it has to do with like things being easy, but it's not about it being easy. It's about you being in control of it, even if it's hard. And if you fail, like that's okay. I mean, I failed tons of times in there. But the thing is, it was my choice, right? It was like, it was the battle that I chose. And if I wipe, so be it. I'm the one that zoned in. And so if you want to start feeling powerful in life, people think that it's about success. It's not about success. It's about choice. Because at least it's your failure. Like you get to own it. Whereas like what's happening right now is people are just getting owned right, left, and center by shit that is out of their control. And so like you're not going to be able to control that. But here's the thing. There are people out there who are crushing it every day. COVID is still real for those people. Climate change is still real for those people. The online dating world is still real for those people. All of those external circumstances that you attribute to your failures in life exist for other people too. The difference is like, how do you approach it? Right? Do you just get bodied by it, or do you start with any kind of small thing, which is what the solution is? And this is what's so confusing. It's not, people aren't stupid for feeling this way, right? Like it's very genuinely confusing. So there's like just this key principle of understanding of active challenges versus passive challenges. We can lean on psychology, we can lean on science, we can lean on, to a certain degree, anecdotal experience, and we can learn about ourselves. And once we understand how this stuff works, then you'll realize, okay, fine, so I need to take on some active challenge. It's kind of bizarre, but if you feel overwhelmed and like you can't fix, like you can't do enough, it is completely paradoxical to say do more, right? Like it doesn't logically follow until you understand this principle of active and passive challenges. It's just do something yourself, right? Like have some kind of active challenge in your life. Because then when you choose something, then you succeed, you feel amazing. It's like, I did something today. I'm making progress, right? And it's tough. It's super tricky. So someone's talking about burnout. So burnout is the end result of excessive passive challenges. So if you actually look at the original research done on burnout by Maslow, the way that Maslow defined burnout is that it's essentially a human being working against a system that does not like give them any slack. So it's like when a human tries to do a good job and a system like spits in their face and doesn't let them do a good job. That's what leads to burnout, right? So like what essentially leads to burnout is like systems issues. It's like getting like bodied by like all kinds of like passive challenges, like over and over and over again. And so this is why, you know, it's tricky because as the world's problems are getting worse in a sense, I mean, a lot of metrics have improved, right? So we've got like cell phones and infant mortality is like better than it used to be. You know, I understood that someone did a head transplant in animals and it survived for like a day or something, right? So science is advancing, technology is advancing. There's like a lot of good stuff coming out of the world. And yet people are burnt out at a whole new level. And why is that? It's because we've stopped taking control of our lives, right? Like systems have developed in such a way that like the passive challenges that we face are so catastrophic. Like online dating, COVID, economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like life is just throwing all these obstacles our way that we didn't sign up for. And then since we didn't sign up for them and we have to deal with them, we start to sacrifice the things that we want to do in order to deal with this stuff. And then we get a society of burnout. Makes perfect sense when viewed through this lens. Right? Okay. I'm doing well. I have time I want to teach some meditation, but I want to get to the religion one. Okay. So there's one, I know that people seem to be the least interested in this, but I think that it felt important to me to do, so apologies, because I do think that we don't really talk about religion and mental health much. So I know we talk a fair amount about kind of like spirituality and stuff, but there was a really good question. And I think that the other thing to remember is that even though a lot of our Twitch audience may not be, or like a lot of our audience may not have concerns about religion, I think it's important to remember that it is a big part of many people's lives. So I wanted to talk a little bit about religion and mental health and just sort of explain some of the stuff around it. Let me see if I actually have. Okay, wow. Okay, so I just got a crop of research stuff, but. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is going to be too hard to go through. So let's talk a little bit about religion and mental health. So here's a post. All right. So parents blame mental health problems on lack of religious faith. So hello, HG community, and thank you for being an open place to discuss things. Good job, everyone at HG. For as long as I remember, I have had problems with my mental health. It has been especially hard during the time where I've been away from parents to complete studies. Whenever I try to have this conversation with my parents on my declining mental health, my parents, especially my father, makes it a point that this decline has been in large part due to me not taking my religion seriously, Islam, and I should just pray and be more pious. Now, I understand where he's coming from. He was born during a time of war and revolution in my country of origin, and he got to where he is despite those circumstances through a strong spiritual faith. As a result, whenever he says this to me, instead of feeling better, I just feel ashamed and guilty because I'm not pious or mentally strong as he is. I do admit I have some doubts and negative feelings towards my religion and have not been practicing my faith much because it brings about a lot of painful memories because in my country it was used as a tool of control and oppression. I still don't know where I stand regarding religion, in large part because I feel like I have not had the time to explore what it means to me and to separate it from the negative ways it's been used to control and make people miserable. How should I reignite the thread of discussion with my parents in a fruitful way? So, sorry for the long post, and thank you for reading if you did. Okay? So, I think this is a really, really important post. And there are a couple of things that I want to start with, which are actually disclaimers of sort, and just like setting some ground rules. So I understand that religion can be quite a divisive topic, right? So we touched on one or two of those back in 2021, and I guess we haven't learned our lesson yet, so here we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about religion and mental health today. I want to lay out a couple of disclaimers. So the first is that I'm not an expert on religion. I'm not a religious scholar. I don't really know, it's not my field of expertise. That being said, I have spent a lot of time exploring religion. So I grew up going to a Catholic school and pretty familiar with Christianity and Catholicism, and then also like went through my own journey. I grew up Hindu, but was basically agnostic or atheistic for like most of my life, or not most now because I'm older. And then sort of rediscovered a love for karmic religions, for lack of better terms. So this sort of includes Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. Eastern religions is another way to put it, once I understood what they were actually saying. And so there may be a bias there because I have, explored a lot of different religions and sort of decided on a particular spiritual path which suits me. So apologies if it comes across as biased in that way. And the last thing is that I think that this is the reason I'm sort of bringing it up is because I think that this is an important thing to talk about because a lot of the world is religious. And what's the relationship between religion and mental health? So I'd like to approach this in the way that we do at other things at HG, which is like, let's just kind of like look at it pretty critically and analytically and try to understand, does religion have a positive impact on mental health, negative impact on mental health? And if it does have a positive or negative impact, what are the reasons for that? What are the mechanisms for it? And so I think what we'll sort of discover is actually pretty cool, okay? So the first thing that we're going to talk about is, I know it sounds kind of weird before we get into religion, what improves mental health? Okay, so there are all kinds of things that contribute to your mental health, like physical health, diet, etc. But what we're going to start by focusing on is actually something called common factors research. So some time ago, there was one form of essentially psychotherapy. And that form was psychoanalysis, was discovered by like Freud and Jung and those people. And then over time, psychoanalysis became psychotherapy or psychodynamic psychotherapy. And then like over time, like we had this group of behaviorists that developed cognitive behavioral therapy. Oh no, we're lagging. And then someone who learned CBT and psychotherapy learned how to meditate. And they're like, hey, this is cool. And they developed dialectical behavioral therapy. And I can see that we're lagging, so I'm going to I guess I'm just going to talk. Oh no, there it goes. Okay. And so then what we sort of discovered is that there's a bunch of different types of psychotherapy, right? So like, and they're quite different. So, So cognitive behavioral therapy is very different from DBT, because like this has a mindfulness component. Psychodynamic psychotherapy is similar to psychoanalysis, so it's like quite different. And so people sat down and they started to figure out, okay, like which one of these is best, because they're very different. In one, we're talking about your dreams. We're doing dream analysis. Like this is over here. Like dream analysis is like quite different from meditation, which is like quite different from doing like worksheets about your feelings. So these are all very different. Which one's the best? So as people started to compare different things, what they sort of discovered is they're all about the same. And then that got really confusing, because it's like, how does meditation offer the same benefit as something like dream analysis? Like, how the hell does that even work? Like, how can these things essentially give you the same benefit? Like, that doesn't make any sense because they're so different. And so what people sort of started looking at is something called common factors research. And this iPad thing is lagging, so we're going to just go old school lecture style, okay? So they looked at common factors research, and essentially what they figured out is that, it's not actually any one of these particular things, but there's a set of common factors that will determine whether something is mentally, like, helps your mental health or doesn't help your mental health. So there are 2 or 3 big things that they sort of discovered. The first is something called the therapeutic alliance. So you need to have someone that you can trust and talk to, like that can like sort of handle your mental things. You need a consistent, trusted space to go to with your mental health problems. The second thing they discovered was that you need an organizing framework. So like the good therapists are not necessarily, it's not that CBT is like more correct than psychoanalysis, or that DBT is more correct than CBT. It's that whoever is like teaching you the stuff, or whoever is offering mental health support, needs to have an organizing framework that sort of encompasses everything that we kind of look at. And so these were kind of 2 of the really big things that they kind of discovered. So the interesting thing is that, back in the day, we didn't really have like an appreciation for mental health. So like, where did people go with their mental health problems, right? So if I feel sad, or I lose a child and I'm going through the grief process, who do I go to like help me make sense of that? Because we've sort of discovered through research that that's really important for people. Where's like a place that organizes the way that I view the world, and a lens that I can use to understand problems in myself. And this used to be done through religion, right? So like, that's what religion sort of did. Like, if you lose your kid, like, who do I turn to? Like, okay, I'm going to turn to like a priest, right? So hopefully there's like a strong therapeutic alliance there. There's a trusted person who has an organizing framework that they can use to like help me navigate my problems. And we even see this from this particular poster, that this person's dad went through a very, tumultuous time in their life that was not easy. And religion sort of gave them answers, gave them a narrative, gave them maybe a trusted space. And so they use those kinds of things to kind of like navigate their life and get some kind of mental strength and fortitude. So that sort of makes sense, right? So like, if you kind of look at it that way, religion sort of touches on a couple of the parts of common factors research, okay? So, what do we need? We need a therapeutic alliance. And then we need an organizing framework. And in the past, this is where religion used to do these 2 things. So there are a couple of other big things that are very, very important that religion does for us. One is it gives us a sense of community or social capital. So there have been numerous studies that show that social interactions and social capital are good for mental health, right? So like, isolation makes mental health problems worse. Community makes mental health problems better. We have like a shared group of people that we can like survive with or process things with, right? So we see this a lot, for example, with like the Jewish diaspora, where there's like a very, very strong sense of like community and like an almost us versus them kind of mentality, which has downsides. But that strong social connection, we see this a lot also amongst like, Indian diaspora too. So like Indians and Hindus, like we all hang out with each other, right? Because this is like our shared culture. It's our religion. So we have a strong sense of community, at least where I live. And we kind of all get together, and these have positive impacts on mental health. So religion kind of offers, a safe space, theoretically, where people you can trust. Religion definitely offers an organizing framework, right? Depending on which religion you believe in, stuff like heaven, hell, sin, good, bad, etc. Like it just gives us lots of like ways to view the world. Why does a bad thing happen to me? Well, because religion will give you an answer. And it'll say because of this and that. It definitely offers a sense of community, right? And then there are two other things that I think are really, really important that religion offers. One is sublimation of ego. So if you guys watch our streams a lot, you're going to know that a lot of our suffering comes from our ego. Ego isn't all bad, but religion is essentially like, at least Abrahamic religions tend to be like very sublimating the ego oriented. So a good example of this is Alcoholics Anonymous. So this is something I know a little bit more about, which is why I'm going to use this as an example. So Alcoholics Anonymous is a very successful, on the whole, a very successful organization that helps people gain sobriety. There are some studies that even suggest that Alcoholics Anonymous is the most successful intervention that someone can do that has the greatest chance of having someone become sober. There are all kinds of caveats and problems with that research, but you could definitely make the argument. So a big thing that's kind of bizarre about Alcoholics Anonymous is it starts with the idea that I am powerless in the face of my addiction. And that's weird, right? Like we'd think like logically that, if you want to overcome a problem, like we want to empower people, right? Like we want people to be like, yeah, like you can do it. Like you can kick this habit. Like you're in control. Like you can do it. And so Alcoholics Anonymous, which is very heavily founded in Christian roots, by the way. So it's very religious. So they believe in like higher power and like a lot of Christianity, like focused themes and stuff like that, which rubs people the wrong way. If you guys are not really into that, Refuge Recovery is a very good alternative. So that's like, has a lot of like fellowship and community, but is based more on Buddhist principles. So this is kind of weird, right? Because like Alcoholics Anonymous and Christianity will sort of say, this is where I could be misspeaking. So apologies if I'm offending people, but like there's sort of this idea that in the Abrahamic religions that God is all powerful and like you are not, right? Like that's common in the Abrahamic religions, is that God can like do whatever they want to, but like you as a human being, you don't have all the power in the universe, which is different from the karmic religions, because the karmic religions actually sort of say the opposite, or even say that you are one with God and you are just as powerful as divinity is, or you are divine. So that's kind of different there. But since the person is kind of coming from the tradition of Islam, and we'll just use that as an example. So like, if you kind of think about it, how is this sort of like ego sublimation, like how can this help with mental health, right? Because this is a big part of, religion, is sublimating your ego and sort of like teaching you that God is all powerful and you are not, and all this kind of good stuff. And so Alcoholics Anonymous is a good example of this, because a big part of the addict's brain is, I can handle this. So when people kind of say this, right? Like when your brain says, I can handle it. I'm in control. It's this kind of thought, which is essentially coming from the ego, right? This is coming from the ahamkara, or ego. And this is the thought that gets you in trouble. So when you adopt like a sublimation of the ego kind of attitude, it actually does seem to help in terms of kicking in addiction. There's good data for that. And I suspect that it helps too in terms of like dealing with suffering, right? Because we know that ego is associated with suffering. And so we can sort of see how, okay, so like if we're sublimating the ego, we're going to decrease our suffering. And this may in turn improve mental health. And there's also good data behind this as well. So if we look at the outcomes of meditative practice, which will sort of, sublimate the ego, weaken the ego, and that seems to be correlated with people like being happier, because we know that meditation improves mental health. Okay, so that's another mechanism that religion uses. And the last mechanism that we're going to talk about is that religion does actually teach us discipline of the mind. Hopefully. We're going to talk about caveats in a second. So if we think about things like saying Hail Marys, right? What we're literally doing is it's a dharana technique. So it's focusing the mind. When we go to church every Sunday, we're like sort of disciplining ourselves because we got to go to church. So you can't be a degenerate. Like you got to get to church, you got to like get dressed up and you got to clean yourself up and this and that. Right? So when you pray 5 times a day, that sort of improves your awareness. Like you can't lose track of time because you got to pray 5 times a day. So a lot of like religion has baked into it techniques like prayer, which involve like focusing the mind and probably have health benefits as a result. And so this is where things get a little bit, so a lot of religion has actually like stuff kind of baked in that results in disciplining of the mind. So can religion help mental health? There's some studies that actually suggest that religion and spirituality, actually religion, can have positive effects on mental health. There are lots of downsides to religion and mental health as well. So for example, this person is talking a little bit about guilt, right? So like, I don't know where I stand. I feel ashamed and guilty. So religion is not necessarily a blanket, or it's in no way a blanket positive force for mental health. So there's a lot of like abuse of power. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of betrayal of trust. There's a lot of like bad things that come out of of religion. So when we sublimate the ego, can that improve our suffering and mental health? Yes. But sublimation of the ego also makes us ripe to be taken advantage of, right? Because if I'm powerless in the face of whatever, and there's this priest who's all powerful and he says do something, then I should do that, right? So there are definitely downsides which can happen with religion. But there is some research that suggests that religion can have positive impacts on mental health. And as we start to sort of unpack what is it that religion does, like what are the mechanisms of religion, what we sort of discover is that I haven't seen anything that suggests that a particular religion is more more beneficial for mental health than another religion. I'm not an expert in the research, by the way. So I think what I would conclude sort of scientifically is that it's not a particular religion. And actually, this is also influenced by the studies that I've done, because Patanjali says this too. So he says that you can meditate and all this kind of stuff. Well, that's fantastic. You can attain enlightenment that way. But you can also attain enlightenment through devotion and surrender to God. And the key thing that Patanjali doesn't really explain in a whole lot of detail, because that's not what he talks about. But if you really like look at some of these yogic texts, what they say is that it's not the God part that leads to enlightenment. It's the devotion and surrender part. So the God that you surrender to doesn't matter. It's not like this God will give you more spiritual growth than that God. Now, I recognize that is a contentious statement for a lot of people who insist that their God is the better God and that's the one that you should surrender to. But what Patanjali sort of said is that he's like, the important part is like the sublimation of the ego and the devotion to an object, whether it's a particular God or it's an ideal or whatever. It's the devotion to the thing that results in the spiritual growth. And so what we can kind of see if we sort of unpack religion is that there are like 5 things that I think will contribute to people's mental health that religion or religious organizations and religions tend to offer, right? And this is where it's kind of like, do you have to be religious to improve your mental health? Absolutely not. But I think the advantage of religion is that it's kind of like a combo meal, right? It's like prepackaged. Everything's sort of set up for you. So you kind of get, hopefully, these things if you go to a good religious place without like having to structure them yourself. Because if you don't want to go that route, which is totally fine, then what I think it's important to do is if you want to get these benefits, then you have to structure each of these things yourself, right? So you can go and order the combo meal and you're going to get kind of everything you need for one meal. It's going to be packaged, right? There's ups and downs to that. But if you decide, okay, so if religion can be good for my mental health, but like, what if I'm not religious? Does that mean I need to become religious? I'd say absolutely not. You do not need to become religious. If you are, not religiously inclined, then here are the things that you should do. So first is find a trusted source. So this is where like I think mentorship is critical here, right? This can also be like a therapist. Number 2, figure out how the world works. You need an organizing framework. So this is like kind of a tall ask. Like this is the advantage of religion, which is like they just tell you. They're like, hey, here's how it works. We don't have to believe them. You don't have to trust it, whatever. But if you're not going to do that, then you need to do the work to figure out what is the organizing principle, or like what are the organizing principles that I'm going to use to make sense of like why crap happens. Is it going to be science? Is it going to be philosophy? Is it going to be spirituality of like a particular tradition, like meditation? Right? Is it going to be like some kind of like family, cultural kind of thing? So whatever, but you need some kind of organizing framework, right? Next thing that you're going to need is community. So if you want to meet people, going to church is a really, really easy way to do it, right? They're like people that are, generally speaking, they tend to be pretty nice, right? So it's like a great form of like social capital and community and stuff like that. So if you don't have that, you're going to need to like find a community, find your tribe. Number 4 is sublimate the ego. Because religion, once again, does it for you. I think sometimes they do it to the detriment of people, right? When they really browbeat you and treat you with a lot of guilt and shame. I don't think that that's healthy personally. So you can also get like PTSD and all kinds of self-worth problems from the wrong kind of religious interaction. So this too is hard, but I think this you can meditate, for lack of a better term. And then number 5 is, once again, meditation and yoga. So you're going to need to learn like discipline and like, practices and stuff like that, which is tricky. But, this is your substitute to religion. And I think what's starting to happen, part of the reason that we're seeing a decline in religion is because the things that religion basically used to be the only one that did this stuff, right? So like 1,000 years ago, like science wasn't that well developed. Like they couldn't really give us answers about how the world works. Our community and our tribe was like tangled up with our religion. The way that we learned discipline and the way that we learned to sublimate the ego were like, basically all that existed was the combo meal, because we just didn't have options. And now as we're starting to learn more about meditation, as we're starting to learn more about community and science and things like that, you don't need to go to a religion to get the mental benefits of religion anymore. Now this, once again, is going to be a biased view, because I'm sure there are going to be people out there who will say that my religion, by virtue of what it is, offers a significant benefit. So specifically, like people will say like, believing in Allah, like will help your depression. That's what this person's dad says. And they're going to say that this is different from believing in Jesus, that Allah has an effect that Jesus does not have, right? So like that's where some people will say believing in Jesus is going to have an effect. Even Hindus will say that, but I don't really think that's what the Hindu religion says. To the Hindu religion, part of what I like about it is that they're sort of like, you can be atheistic and you can be Hindu. You can be agnostic and you can be Hindu. It's a little bit more, in my mind, and this could be where my bias is, I really don't think so, but if you really look at it objectively, like if you look at the religious texts of Hinduism, the oldest religious texts are 25% music theory, 25% medicine, 25% rituals, and 25% creation myths. And so you'll also have people like Patanjali who are like, you can believe in God or like not believe in God. So even the concept of Hinduism as a religion is sort of like false. Like that idea of religion, even the word religion is like a Judeo-Christian concept. When people ask, are you Hindu? Like the are you a religion is like a Judeo-Christian concept, right? Because the Abrahamic religions were the ones who sort of said there's like us and not us. There's like the people of Israel and there's like the not people of Israel. They're like the ones who believe in Christ and like the ones who don't believe in Christ. There's like, the infidels and the not infidels. So that fundamental idea of owning to a religion, converting to a religion, believing in a religion, that's actually sort of like a Western concept, because it's like, how do you convert to Buddhism? Like you don't really, sure you can. Someone somewhere out there will convert you to Buddhism if you want to. There are going to be sects that will convert people, but it's not really like Buddha didn't, start he wasn't saying like you should believe what I say. Like he was just teaching stuff. So the karmic religions are quite different in that way, in that they're sort of just a collection of information. And what the karmic religions did, they didn't separate out spirituality from the other things. It's just like if you go to university, you can major in religion and you can major in mathematics. It's no different. It's not like spirituality is like a different thing from science. They're actually all tangled together. They're just different sources of knowledge. And so if you look at, for example, karma, like karma is just the principle of cause and effect, which is like, has physics applications and has like non-physics applications. Which is why, you have music theory and medicine, which are part of the holy books, because that's like the idea of a holy book is also like alien to Hinduism. There's like no such thing as a holy book. There's no Bible in Hinduism. There's like all kinds of texts, and you can sort of believe which one you want. So it's a little bit more, in my opinion, scientific, but that's probably going to piss a lot of people off, because the idea that I say my religion is more scientific than your religion is like is like a easy way to piss people off. But I really do think that, I haven't seen any, prescriptions for malaria in the Bible, whereas you'll see that in Indian or Hindu religious texts. Right? Yeah, so this is the other thing. So Hexacorn is saying religion equals scientific. So in the West, we view those things as like contrary, right? We think of like religion and science as like being on opposite ends of the spectrum. But especially in the Eastern religions, like if you read Patanjali, it's like quite scientific. Like it's critical. So it also encourages you, like the Brahma Sutra, for example, is like a text that will teach you logic and will teach you how to poke holes in arguments. So it's like a text on logic, which is generally considered like a religious text by people in the West. But in the East, it's just Brahma Sutra. They just taught everything. So when you when you went to, like, if you became like a monk, for example, you had to learn medicine. Like it was all part of the same education. So like all religious leaders like were doctors and were trained in surgery, for example. I mean, that may not be fair to say when I'm saying all, because I wasn't there. But it's just different, right? So in short, can religion have positive effects on mental health? I think absolutely. There's even data to support that. And at the same time, it's not like religion is the only source of those kinds of things. And if we start to analyze a little bit about, okay, how does religion improve our mental health? What we end up with is essentially 5 factors, right? So there's a trusted, safe space, which seems to be very, very important. And from studies of psychotherapy, we sort of discover that this is a key part of like positive mental health outcomes. We also need an organizing framework. So whether it's DBT or CBT or psychodynamic therapy or psychoanalysis, it doesn't really matter. Whether it's a Hindu worldview or the Christian worldview or whatever, you just need a worldview that is internally consistent and can handle whatever life throws at you. The other big thing about religion is it's a major source of social capital and community, which has very positive effects on mental health. And the last 2 things, these are a little bit more kind of my opinion. There's less research to suggest this, but based on what I've seen, sublimation of the ego is a big common theme amongst religions, which leads to positive mental health outcomes. It's not necessarily that you need to go to religion to do these things, but that seems to be a big part of it based on my study. And the last thing is that it seems to be a pretty systematic way to discipline the mind, which is very, very good for your mental health. And so if can religion be good for your mental health? Absolutely. I think the closer that religions stay to these 5 points, the more positive they're going to be for your mental health. Can they be bad for your mental health? Absolutely. Right? So there's a dark side to sublimating the ego, which is that people may take advantage of you. There's a dark side to disciplining the mind, which is that some of those practices may border on abusive or not even border on abusive. There's a dark side to this, which is that, community and social capital can lead to things like shunning, right? And ostracization if you start to and so suddenly the community, instead of being a positive impact on your mental health, starts to become a negative impact and emotionally damaging to you. And the last thing is that, sometimes the therapeutic alliance gets taken advantage of, and that's really bad for you. So you don't need religion, but it's kind of the combo meal. It's easily packaged and you don't have to really worry about it. But you can by all means develop these things on your own, but it's just going to be harder, right? Because it's not packaged for you. So that's religion and mental health. Questions? Oh, whoops. How do you know when you're being taken advantage of? What a good question. So here's the first thing. So I think a certain amount of awareness is key. But the whole point behind religion is that some of them will indoctrinate you, right? And so they will help you. They won't let you know that you're being taken advantage of, right? In fact, the opposite. They'll say you're not being taken advantage of. So I would say that if you're concerned that you're being taken advantage of, get a external viewpoint from a couple of different people. That's the best way. So if we're sort of questioning the awareness of our mind, right? So I would talk to people like outside of whatever group you have, and be a little bit careful, because they may actually like, so for example, like if you post something on the internet and you say like, this is going on, am I being taken advantage of? Like everyone will be like, yes, you're being taken advantage of. So you have to like find objective people whom you trust that are removed or not biased given the particular concern. So for example, if you're worried that you're being taken advantage of by your church, I would not ask people in your church. And if you say, but I don't know anyone outside of my church, then I'd say, well, maybe that's a problem. So I'd say like, learn about the rest of the world, right? Like, I don't think knowledge is a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a good thing. I think that generally speaking, human beings have gotten better and society has improved the more we've like learned about stuff. So go and like learn about other things and go talk to someone who get someone's opinion who's not biased by what's going on. Yeah, so classic cult behavior is cutting you off from your outside friends and family, which is, that's we got to be careful that we don't do that here, right? So this is where like it's great. We love that this community is so awesome and expanding. And also like you guys should not be a part of the cult. Right? Go and engage with people. Like we want to teach you to be like healthy, happy individuals so that you can go and like live in the world and succeed in the world, and like you don't have to be a part of us forever. Like we want you to stick around, but the whole point of Healthy Gamer is that you can go and do other things. So this is something that's interesting. As a psychiatrist, one of my goal is that people should never have to come to see me again. Like that's the goal. The goal is to get people to leave. And in a weird way, I think HG is sort of the same way, right? The goal is to help you all become independent, and then you don't need us anymore. And so that's, we're not asking you to please leave, right? So you guys can, by all means, like stick around with the community. That's fine. If you want to stay, stay. But the goal is that we should empower you to be able to leave if you want to. That you should learn everything that you need to, and then, maybe help out by all means, like maybe support other people along their part of the journey, give back, do your dharma, all that good stuff. But, if you're ready to go, then go. Go live your life. Go be happy. Go be a healthy gamer. Right? That's the whole point behind the name. Okay. So this is what we're going to do for meditation today. In the event of people wanting to sleep, I'm going to teach y'all Shavasana, which I can't really do on camera because it just involves lying down. So we're going to talk a little bit about Shavasana today. So Shavasana is corpse pose. So it is the meditative posture. It's a yoga posture that involves laying down on the floor, right? So this is how I'm going to walk you guys through it. So I want you all to go ahead and do this if you can. So I'm not going to do it because I'll just be laying down on the floor and you won't be able to see me. But Shavasana is what we're going to do is we're going to lay down on our backs, so face up, okay? So go and sit down on the ground, and then start by sitting up. Just like sit down, like sit cross-legged, or just sit on the floor, and close your eyes. And now what I want you to do is like kind of, you can lean on your shoulder, but kind of slowly go back and lay down on your back. Let your feet extend out. Let your ankles kind of flop out to each side. Let your palms be face up and your arms fully extended. So you kind of want to like lay down on the ground with your arms straight, legs straight, back straight, looking up, palms face up, ankles kind of out to the side, like let your feet kind of flop. You want to keep your feet maybe a shoulder width apart, so they shouldn't be like, you're not standing straight. It's like they're kind of out to the sides. Your arms also can kind of hang down, sort of at a natural angle. And just lay there. This is Shavasana. Breathe nice and slow. Just feel the kind of warm and comforting touch of the ground. With each inhalation, notice as your chest rises. And with each exhalation, notice as your body relaxes. Let yourself sink back a little bit. Relax. And just feel. You may notice thoughts swirling. Let them come. Let them go. Take a moment to process, digest, let go. With each breath, let the tension slip away. Let your mind be still. Float. You may start to feel sleepy, so float in the space between consciousness and unconsciousness. We'll just float here, breathing slowly, letting thoughts come and go, relaxing into the ground for a period of about 3 minutes. If you have a mantra or a sankalpa, a resolve, you can repeat it to yourself now. And notice that in this space of mind, it's almost like you're underwater, that anything spoken underwater travels far, that the mantra or sankalpa can travel across so much distance, the deeper in your mind it is. It has more power, more potency here. And now we'll begin the process of returning to the world. Take a nice deep breath, but more invigorating this time. Let your body start to wake up, your mind start to wake up. Let your eyes remain closed. Slowly sit up with your eyes closed. Stretch your neck, move your arms. Take a moment to give gratitude for feeling so relaxed, for drifting. And now put your palms together in front of you in Namaste position. Start to rub, 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 rub. Feel the friction and the heat between your palms. And then cup them over your eyes. Take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, slowly open your eyes with your palms over them. And as the breath ends, let your hands drift down. So for those of you that did Shavasana, couple of things to remember about it. The first is that it's a relaxing pose. The second is it's very good for engaging the sympathetic nervous system. The third is that if you have difficulty sleeping, notice how tired you are after you do Shavasana, right? So it's very, very good. You don't want to fall asleep during Shavasana. If you do fall asleep, that's okay. But it's very good to be done 15, 20 minutes before you go to sleep. So you kind of get into this chill kind of drift space, finish the end of your bedtime routine, and then go to sleep. And it'll be really, really easy for you to sleep. Okay? So who are we rating today? Where are we going to send our 3,574 viewers? Okay, Anita? We'll rate sweet Anita. Oh, for those of you that are confused about the mantra and the sankalpa, so we're doing this thing on stream where we don't always do the most basic stuff. So Shavasana is for everyone to learn. And for those of you that have been around for a while or have watched Dr. K's guide, so that all that information is in there. Like, what is a mantra? How does a mantra work? What is a sankalpa, a resolve? How does that work? So if you guys are interested in some of those more advanced techniques, that can be found in the guide. Okay? And let's raid sweet Anita. If you guys have questions, I highly recommend posting them to our subreddit. So we do address a couple of them, but the good news is that there's a lot of very knowledgeable people in our community who may be able to answer them as well. So we'll see y'all later, okay? Take care. We'll see y'all Wednesday.